The passport was not hers. The name on it was not hers. The photograph had been swapped 3 weeks before the flight, carefully, by a man in a dark office in Ojalegba, who asked no questions and charged too much and would forget her face the moment she stepped out of his door. The visa inside the passport was real. The woman whose name was printed inside it had applied for it honestly, waited 7 months for it, cried when the approval came, called her mother from the embassy parking lot, and planned a trip she had been dreaming about for 4 years. And then her sister took it. Not borrowed it. Took it. While she slept. While she trusted. While she did what younger sisters do when they believe that the person who shared a womb with them would never be the source of the thing that broke them. And on a Tuesday morning in October, a woman boarded a flight to the United Kingdom using a passport that belonged to her sister. She sat in the seat. She buckled the belt. She looked out the window as Lagos disappeared below her. And she felt, in that moment, something she would spend years trying to describe and never quite managing. She felt like she was flying, like she had escaped something, like the life she wanted was finally beginning. She did not yet understand. She did not yet understand that the thing about escaping is that you always carry the thing you escaped from inside you, in the place where the truth lives, in the place that customs officers cannot search, but that the years always find. If something about that story already made your chest tight, if you already feel where this is going and you cannot look away, hit that like button right now. Subscribe to this channel because we do not flinch from the stories that are real. The ones with complicated women making impossible choices for reasons that make sense at the time and unravel slowly in ways that take everything with them. Subscribe and drop in the comments where you are watching from. We want every city represented, every country, every person who has ever loved a sibling and been loved badly in return. Drop your location and let us begin. Her name was Ulunma Chukwueke, but she had always hated the name, not the meaning. The meaning was, most beautiful one. And Ulunma had grown up understanding, with the particular precision of a girl who pays attention to these things, that she was not the most beautiful one. Her sister was. Her sister Adanna Chukwueke, whose name meant father's daughter, whose face was the kind of face that made people forget what they were saying, whose skin was even, whose smile was wide, whose eyes had a quality that photographers tried to capture and always half missed because the quality was not in the eyes themselves, but in whatever was behind them. Adanna was beautiful. Ulunma was sharp. And in the house they grew up in the compound in Onitsha where their father Nwokibia Chukwueke ran a small but successful hardware shop, and their mother Chibi sat on the parish council and made the best oaf onugbu in 3 streets. In that house, beauty and sharpness occupied very different positions. Beauty got noticed. Sharpness got used. The Chukwueke girls were 2 years apart. Adanna was older. Ulunma was sharper. This distinction organized their entire childhood. Adanna was the one people looked at when they entered a room. Ulunma was the one who ran the room without anyone realizing they were being run. Adanna was the one who was complimented. Ulunma was the one who was consulted. Adanna was the one who was loved in the open, demonstrative, look-at-her way. Ulunma was the one who was loved in the quieter, harder-to-articulate way that sometimes never gets articulated at all. And the thing about love that never gets articulated is this: it still needs to be felt. And when it isn't, when the child grows up and the love was real but the expression of it was always secondary, always a little less bright, always a little more conditional, something happens inside that child. Something small at first, something that can be managed, that can be pushed down, that can be disguised as ambition, as independence, as capability, but something that grows, that calcifies, that becomes, over years and disappointments, and watching your sister receive things that never seem to land near you. Something that one day, when the right opportunity presents itself, makes a terrible decision feel like justice. Their father died when Ulunma was 19. A heart attack. Not dramatic. Not preceded by illness. Just gone. On a Wednesday morning. Between opening the hardware shop and drinking his first cup of tea. Just gone. The hardware shop was managed by a cousin after that. Poorly. Within 18 months, what Nwokibia had built over 20 years had become something that supported the cousin more than the family. The money tightened. The compound that had always felt full began to feel crowded in a different way. The way things feel crowded when people are stressed, and the stress has nowhere to go. Their mother, Chibiz, did what many women of her generation did when the ground shifted. She prayed harder. She pulled the children closer. She made the food stretch further. She held. But holding is not the same as thriving. And two girls in a holding household do different things. Adanna held too. She was gentle by nature. She accepted what was. She had one serious boyfriend in university, a kind, steady, not very exciting man named Chidi who worked in a bank and called every evening and talked about the future with the reliability of someone who had a plan. Ulunma looked at Chidi and thought, this is not enough. Not for her. Not for either of them. But especially not for her. Ulunma wanted. She had always wanted. Not greedily. Specifically, she wanted the house with the compound. She wanted the car that did not ask questions. She wanted the kind of respect that comes when you can pay for things without calculating what the paying will cost you. She wanted what her father had been building, and she wanted it faster than building could provide it. And she had not found the way to get it, until she met David Ashford. David Ashford was British-Nigerian. His father was Igbo, a man from Anambra who had gone to England in the 1980s and built a moderately successful import-export business. His mother was English. A quiet woman from Somerset who had married her university boyfriend and followed him to a life that was bigger than she had planned for, but that she had grown into with grace. David himself was a product of the best of what both parts of his world had given him. He was warm in the Nigerian way. He was organized in the English way. He had money, not obscenely so, but substantially so, the kind of money that is invisible when you live inside it, but unmistakable to everyone outside it. He owned a property development company. He had a flat in London and a house in Lagos that he visited twice a year because his father had always said, "Do not forget where you come from." He was 34. He was not desperate, but he was ready. Ready in the way that a man is ready when he has built the life he wanted to build and now wants the person to share it with. He had been dating carefully, not frantically, with the same methodical attention he brought to property, identifying what he wanted, being patient about finding it. He came to Onitsha on business, a land deal. He attended a church service because his father had always said, "Go to church when you are in a new city." And at that church service, he saw Adanna. He could not help it. Nobody could help it with Adanna. That face, that quality behind the eyes. He introduced himself after service. He was gracious about it. Not aggressive, not performative. He said, "I hope this is not forward of me. I'm David. I'm visiting from London." And Adanna, who was gentle by nature and who found forward men uncomfortable, said, "Not forward at all. I'm Adanna." And that was the beginning. He courted her, properly, with calls and visits and conversations that covered everything from family to faith to what kind of life each of them was imagining. He liked her. He liked her calm. He liked her gentleness. He liked the way she spoke about her family. He liked the values underneath everything she said. He liked her. After 3 months, he told her clearly, "I would like to marry you. I want to do this the right way. I want to meet your family. I want to do the things that need to be done." Adanna was moved. She was also uncertain. She had Chidi, steady, reliable, not very exciting Chidi who called every evening and had a plan. She did not know what to do. She talked to her mother. Her mother said, "Pray." She talked to the churchwomen. They said, "This is a blessing." She talked to Ulunma. And this was her mistake. Not because Ulunma gave her bad advice. Ulunma gave her very good advice. Exactly the right advice. The advice that a clear-eyed, ambitious, organized mind would give about a situation like this. But while Ulunma was giving the advice, she was also doing something else. She was looking at David Ashford, at what he represented, at the life attached to him, at the fact that her sister was uncertain. And Ulunma was never uncertain. She began to meet with David, under the guise of helping her sister think through the decision. Under the reasonable cover of, "My sister is considering your proposal. I am the family's practical one. I need to understand you better to advise her properly." David was fine with this. He respected the family involvement. He found Ulunma interesting. Not the way he found Adanna beautiful. That was different. That was the first thing, but interesting. She was sharp. She was direct. She could discuss his business with genuine understanding. She made him laugh in ways that surprised him. He thought, this is a remarkable family. Both daughters so different. Both so themselves. He did not understand what was happening. He did not understand that the conversations with Ulunma were not really about Adanna. They were about Ulunma. They were Ulunma presenting herself, layering herself, building something, the way you build a case. Methodical, patient, precise. Then David told Adanna he needed to go back to London for 6 weeks. Business. He said, "I will return. And when I return, I would like an answer." Adanna said, "I understand." He left. And in the 6 weeks he was gone, Ulunma worked. She worked the way she always worked. Quietly, without anyone realizing they were being worked. She wrote to David. Not love letters. Nothing inappropriate. Practical, engaging, intelligent correspondence. About things he had mentioned caring about. About things she had researched because he cared about them. She sent him articles about property markets. She sent him a family photograph caption with a line that made him smile. She began the slow, invisible process of making herself present in his mind. And while she was doing this, she was also doing something to her sister. Not actively. By omission. She began to agree with Adanna's doubts. She began to validate the uncertainty. She said things like, "But is he really right for you, Adanna? You've always loved Chitty." She said, "A life in London is far, Adanna. Mama is getting older. Can you really leave?" She said, "You're not sure. If you were sure, you would know." The fact that you're not sure is itself an answer. These were not false things. Every word was technically true, but they were precisely aimed. They were designed to widen the doubt, to grow the uncertainty, to help Adanna make a decision that Ulunma had already decided Adanna should make. 6 weeks later, David returned. Adanna told him she was not ready. She was kind about it. She was honest about it. She said, "David, I have someone I have been with for years. I do not think it would be right to leave that without being certain. And I am not certain." He was gracious. He was disappointed, but he was gracious. He said, "I respect that completely. I appreciate your honesty." He left the family home. He was in Onitsha for 3 more days before returning to London. On the second of those 3 days, Ulunma appeared at the hotel where he was staying. She said she needed to speak with him about something private. He met her in the lobby. She said, "I owe you an honesty that my family's politeness did not give you." He waited. She said, "My sister did not choose you because she chose her comfort zone. Not because you were not enough. You are more than enough, David. You are exactly the kind of man that deserves to be chosen clearly." He was quiet for a moment. He said, "Why are you telling me this?" She said, "Because I have watched this whole process. And I have seen something that I think you should know." She paused. She said, "I would have said yes." Silence. She looked at him directly, the way she looked at everything, without flinching. She said, "That is all I came to say. I'm sorry if it's inappropriate." She stood to leave. He said, "Wait." That was where it began. The real beginning. Not the church meeting. Not the 6 weeks of correspondence. Not even this hotel lobby conversation. Exactly. The beginning was in the word, wait. In his decision to say wait. In the choice to turn toward the sharper sister instead of walking away entirely. He was not a foolish man. He was not reckless. He thought about it. For 3 days, he thought about it. And then he called Ulunma. And they talked. Not about Adanna. About themselves. For the first time. Without the cover of anything else. Just themselves. And what he found was that the woman on the phone was remarkable, was clear, was ambitious in a way that did not frighten him, in a way that actually matched something in him. Was the kind of person who, once committed, you felt would be entirely committed. Was not gentle, but not cold. Was something harder than gentle and more honest than politeness. Was real. He told himself, she is real. He did not ask himself whether the reality had been constructed. He did not ask himself whether the remarkable clarity was a version of herself she had built specifically for him. He thought, she is real. He went back to London. He kept calling. 3 months later, he proposed. Not to Adanna. To Ulunma. Let us stop here. Let us slow down. Because before we go further, before we follow Ulunma into what she built and how it collapsed, we must understand what happened in the Chukwueke compound on the day Adanna found out. Their mother found out first. Ulunma told her. She told her with the practiced calm of someone who had rehearsed the telling. She said, Mama, David Ashford has asked me to marry him. I have said yes. Chabiz looked at her younger daughter. She looked at her for a long time. She said, David, the man who came for your sister. Ulunma said, Adanna said no to him, Mama. She chose Chidi. Chabiz said, Ulunma. She said the name and nothing else. But the name said everything. Said, I know you. Said, I know what you did. Said, I cannot prove it and you will not admit it, but I know. Ulunma said, Mama, Adanna is happy. She has what she wants. I am not taking anything from her. Chabiz said, you are taking from her something she does not know she has yet. Ulunma said, that is not how choices work. She made her choice. Chabiz was quiet. She said, when are you telling your sister? Ulunma said, today. I came to you first. Chabiz said, go and tell her then. And whatever she says, I want you to really hear it. Adanna took it differently from how Ulunma expected. Ulunma had expected anger, or tears, or the loud, demonstrative hurt of a woman who has realized she has been outmaneuvered. What she got was quiet. Adanna went very quiet. She looked at her sister. She said, how long? Ulunma said, we have been talking for 3 months. Adanna said, while I was making my decision. Not a question, a fact being confirmed. Ulunma said, Adanna. Adanna said, while I was praying and thinking and talking to Mama and talking to you. You were talking to him. Yes. And you told him things. I was honest with him. Adanna looked at her sister. She said, were you honest with me? Silence. The particular silence of something that cannot be unsaid because it was never said. The silence of an omission. Adanna said, I want to say I'm surprised. She paused. She said, but I'm not. She stood. She left the room. She did not shout. She did not cry. Not in front of Ulunma. And somehow that was worse. Somehow Adanna's quiet was louder than any noise could have been. The wedding happened. It was not a large wedding. David's family came from London. The Chukwueke family came from Onitsha. All of them, including Adanna, who stood in the church in a green dress and smiled at appropriate moments and hid whatever she was feeling with a skill that Ulunma recognized because it was her own skill reflected back at her. A skill they had both developed in the same household. For different reasons. At different times. After the church, there was a reception. David's father gave a speech. He said he was happy. He said his son had chosen well. He looked at Ulunma when he said it, and his eyes were warm, and Ulunma received the warmth and held it. This was what she had wanted. This warmth. This belonging. This place at a table where people looked at her and saw something worth celebrating. Adanna caught her eye once across the reception. A long look. Ulunma looked back. Neither of them smiled. Then Adanna looked away, and Ulunma turned back to her new husband and tried to feel what a bride should feel. They went to London. And here is where the story changes shape. Because the London that Ulunma arrived in was not the London she had imagined. Not because it was worse. Because it was real. And real things are never exactly what you imagine them to be. David's flat was nice. In East London. Good area. Proper. But it was a flat. Not a house. Not a compound. Just a flat. with neighbors above and below, with a kitchen that felt small after the sprawling kitchen of the Onitsha compound, with a city outside that was loud and cold and indifferent in the way that large cities are indifferent to individuals. David went to work at 7:30 every morning. He came home at 7:30 every evening, sometimes later, sometimes much later when a deal was in progress. Ulunma was alone for those hours. Long, gray English hours, with the rain, and the cold, and the television, and the knowledge that everything she was supposed to feel like a triumph felt, in the silence, like a different kind of cage. She had no work permit yet. David was sorting the paperwork. It was taking time. The way these things take time. She could not work. She could not study. She could only be in the flat, waiting, thinking, missing things she had not expected to miss. The noise of Onitsha, the smell of her mother's kitchen, the sound of Adanna moving around in the next room. That last one surprised her the most. The missing of Adanna, the missing of the person she had hurt in the process of getting here. And then the visa problem. It started with a letter from the Home Office. David brought it home one evening and handed it to her. His face was doing something careful. The face of someone who is trying not to show what they are feeling until they understand what they are feeling. She took the letter. She read it. The Home Office was requesting clarification on some details of her application. Details related to her previous travel history. Details that, on examination, did not match the records held. David said, "Ulunma, is there something about your immigration history that I don't know?" She looked at him. She felt the floor of the thing she had built begin to shift. She said, "Let me make some calls." He said, "What kind of calls?" She said, "To find out what this is about." He said, "I would like to know what it is about too." His voice was even, controlled. The voice of a man who is choosing his words carefully because he suspects the next few minutes will matter. She said, "David, give me a day." He looked at her. That look, not unkind, but very clear. The look of a man who is deciding whether to extend trust. He said, "One day." He went to the bedroom. She sat in the kitchen, alone, with the letter, and the thing she had been carrying since that office in Ojalegba. The story about the visa is this. When Adanna had received her UK visa, it had been under her own name, her own passport, her own application. Ulunma had her own passport. She had applied for a UK visa twice. Both times she had been refused. The second refusal had a note in it. A note about inconsistencies in her application. A note that effectively made future applications more difficult. This was the thing she had not told David. This was the thing she had worked around. When the plan to marry David materialized, when the proposal became real, she had faced a practical problem. She needed to get to London. She needed a visa. She did not have one. Adanna did. Adanna had one that was valid, that had been approved, that she had applied for before any of this happened, back when she had been planning a trip to visit a friend who had relocated. A friend's trip that had never happened because the friend had returned to Nigeria unexpectedly. So the visa sat, valid, and used. And Ulunma, who had never been accused of not being resourceful, had used it. She had replaced the photograph. She had practiced Adanna's signature. She had studied Adanna's mannerisms enough. They were sisters, after all. They shared gestures. They shared a cadence to pass the border. She had flown to London as Ulunma Chukwueke. And once she arrived, once she and David married and the spouse visa application began, the original entry visa became part of the paperwork. And the Home Office had found something, some discrepancy, between the entry record and the application details. Between the photograph on the original visa application and the photograph on the marriage documents. Something small. But government systems, when they are looking, find small things. And small things, in immigration matters, become large very quickly. She called the immigration lawyer, a man David used for his business. She told him as much as she could without telling him everything. He asked her directly, "Mrs. Ashford, the entry visa, was it issued in your name?" Silence. She said, "I need your help." He said, "I need the truth." Another silence. She said, "No. It was not issued in my name." He was quiet for a long moment. He said, "Whose name was it issued in?" She said the name. She heard him exhale. He said, "Mrs. Ashford, I need you to understand the seriousness of what you are describing. Identity fraud in relation to a visa application is a criminal offense under UK immigration law. The use of another person's identity documents is treated extremely seriously by the Home Office." She said, "What happens now?" He said, "What happens now depends on several things. Whether you come forward voluntarily, whether there has been a formal inquiry opened, whether your marriage," he stopped, "whether all aspects of your marriage application were made in good faith." She said, "What do you mean by that?" He said, "Mrs. Ashford, if your marriage was entered into for immigration purposes, it wasn't. I understand. But the Home Office may not see it that way when they find discrepancies of this kind." She sat with the phone. She sat with everything it contained. She said, "What do I do?" He said, "First, you tell your husband." She told David that night. All of it. She had considered not telling him everything. She had considered giving him a version. A reduced version. A manageable version. But something that had not been present in her for a very long time. Some remnant of a thing she had buried under ambition. Something made her tell him everything. The visa refusals. The discrepancy note. Adanna's visa. The man in Ojalegba. The photograph. The border. The flight. All of it. She told it in their kitchen. At the table. With the letter from the Home Office between them. She told it without crying. Because Ulunma did not cry easily. She told it flatly. Like reading a document. Like evidence being submitted. This happened. And this. And this. Because she had found that the only way she could tell the truth was to not feel it while she was telling it. David listened. He sat completely still. He did not interrupt. Not once. He let her say the whole thing. And when she finished, the kitchen was the loudest quiet she had ever sat in. He said, eventually, "The visa you used. You took it from Adanna?" She said, "Yes." He said, "Does she know?" She said, "No." He said, "Does she know you used her identity to enter the country?" "No." "Does she know any of this?" "No." He stood up. He picked up the letter. He walked to the window. He looked out at the city. The London night. The lights. She watched his back. She watched the stillness of him. She knew that whatever he was deciding in that stillness would determine the shape of the rest of her life. He said, "Ulunma." She said, "Yes." He said, "Did you love me when you married me? Or was I a way out?" The question. The only question that mattered. The one she had not prepared an answer for because she had not expected him to ask it so directly. She thought about the hotel lobby. I would have said yes. She thought about the 3 months of correspondence. She thought about the proposal. She thought about standing at the altar. She thought about the green dress Adanna wore. She thought about the long gray London hours. And the missing. And what she had been missing. She said both. He turned. He looked at her. She said, "At the beginning, you were partly a way out. That is the truth. But then I knew you. And I chose you again. From knowing you. That is also the truth." He looked at her for a long time. He said, "I believe you." She did not expect that. She said, "David." He said, "I believe you. But believing you does not make the problem go away." He sat back down. He said, "I need to call the lawyer." She said, "I already called him." He said, "What did he say?" She said, "He said I need to tell you." David almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. He said, "Wise man." He picked up his phone. The process that followed was long, complicated, expensive, and it required the one thing that Ulunma had been hoping to avoid. It required Adanna. The lawyer was clear. He said, "The simplest path forward involves full disclosure to the Home Office and cooperation with the investigation. Part of that cooperation means producing the actual person whose identity was used." Ulunma said, "And if she doesn't cooperate?" He said, "Then the path is significantly harder, and significantly longer, and the outcome is significantly less certain." David said, We contacted Adanna. He said it the way he made business decisions. Once the logic was clear, without drama, but with finality. Ulunma said, David, she doesn't know. I stole her documents while she was sleeping. She stopped. She pressed her lips together. She said, she will hate me. David said, she might. He said it without comfort, but also without cruelty. Just, she might. He said, but the alternative is worse. She knew he was right. She had always been the one who was right. Now being right was someone else's job, and it was being done at her expense. She picked up the phone. She called the number she had always known. The number she had had since before numbers were stored in phones and were stored in memory instead. Adanna picked up on the fourth ring. She said, Ulunma. Just that. No warmth. No coldness. Just the name. The recognizing of the name. Ulunma said, Adanna, I need to tell you something. She told her over the phone. She could not wait to get to Nigeria to tell her in person. There was no time. She told her everything. The visa, the photograph, the border, all of it. She told it without asking for forgiveness. She just told it. And on the other end of the line, she heard Adanna's breathing. Steady, slow. The way you breathe when you are working very hard to remain calm. Adanna said, you went through my things. Yes. While I was sleeping. Yes. You took my passport. Yes. And you used my name to enter another country. Yes. A very long silence. Then Adanna said, Ulunma, why didn't you just ask me? The question hit Ulunma in the chest like something physical. Because it was the simplest possible question. And it had the most devastating answer. Because if she had asked, Adanna might have said yes. Adanna was gentle. Adanna was forgiving. Adanna might have found a way to help her. But asking would have required honesty. Asking would have required saying, I want what you walked away from. I want the man you turned down. I want the life you decided you didn't need. Asking would have required vulnerability. And vulnerability was the one thing Ulunma did not know how to offer. She said, because I was ashamed. Another silence. Then Adanna said, of wanting, of how much I wanted, of how far I was willing to go to get it. Silence. Adanna said, what do you need from me? Adanna flew to London 3 weeks later. She came with a simple bag and an expression that Ulunma could not read. She came to cooperate with the Home Office, to clarify her identity, to give her account, to confirm what had happened. And here's the thing that changed everything. The thing that Ulunma had not expected. When Adanna spoke to the Home Office solicitor and the immigration officers and the various authorities involved in the process, she was honest. Completely honest. She did not minimize what Ulunma had done. She did not lie to protect her. She told the truth. She said her sister had taken her passport without her knowledge. She said she had not given permission. She said she had not known until recently. She said all of this clearly, without being asked twice, without hedging, without the soft edges that love sometimes puts on truth. Just the truth. Clear. Unambiguous. This was what the process required. And when she had done what the process required, Adanna sat with Ulunma in the flat. For the first time since she had arrived. Alone. And Ulunma waited. Adanna looked around the flat. She looked at the kitchen, the windows, the view of East London. She said, is this what you wanted? Ulunma said, yes. Adanna said, is it what you thought it would be? A pause. Ulunma said, no. Adanna nodded. She said, nothing is. She looked at her sister. She said, I have been angry with you since you told me about David. Before that, even. I think I have been angry with you for longer than I knew. Ulunma said, I know. Adanna said. And then when you called and told me about the visa, when you told me that you went through my things while I was sleeping and took my documents and flew to another country in my name. She stopped. She breathed. She said, I sat on the floor of my bedroom for 2 hours. Just sat there. Ulunma looked at her sister. At her face. At the face that had always been beautiful. That was still beautiful. That was now also something else. Something that had been through things. Adanna said, I want to ask you something. And I want you to answer me honestly. Not the way you were honest when you were building something. The real way. Ulunma said, "Okay." Adanna said, "When we were growing up, did you feel like I was given more than you?" The silence. The enormous, years-old silence. Ulunma said, "Yes." Adanna said, "Were you right?" Another silence. Even longer. Ulunma said, "I don't know. Maybe not in the ways I thought. Maybe yes in some ways that nobody saw." Adanna said, "I felt it too. The difference. I was never comfortable with it." Ulunma looked at her. Adanna said, "Being the one people look at. It sounds like a gift. But it is also a kind of invisibility. Because people see your face and they stop looking. They don't look at what's behind the face. They don't look for your thoughts. They never asked me what I wanted. They told me what I was." She paused. She said, "You were the one with the thoughts. The one with the plans. The one who could see 5 steps ahead. But nobody was looking at you properly either." Ulunma said, "Adanna." Adanna said, "I am not forgiving what you did. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. But I am trying to understand it. Because you are my sister. And whatever you did, you were afraid. And whatever you took it because you were afraid you would never be given it." Her voice was not warm. Not fully. But it was not cold either. It was something more honest than both. It was the voice of a woman who was choosing to see the thing that hurt her clearly, without looking away. Ulunma said, "I am sorry." She said it small. Smaller than her voice usually was. Smaller than she usually allowed herself to be. Adanna said, "I know." She did not say, "I forgive you." Not yet. That was not dishonest. That was true. The forgiveness would come. But it would come in its own time. And forcing it before it was ready would have made it less real. And real was what they needed. Finally, after all of this, real. The legal process took 8 months. 8 long, expensive, uncertain months. The outcome was not simple. The Home Office is not a forgiving institution. Immigration fraud is not a category they treat with sentimentality. But the full cooperation, the voluntary disclosure, the clarity Adanna brought, the lawyer David paid for, the genuine marriage that could be demonstrated. These things mattered. These things were the difference between the worst outcome and the difficult one. The outcome was this. Ulunma was required to leave the UK temporarily. There was a formal caution. There were conditions. She would need to reapply properly, through the proper channels, with full disclosure of the prior refusals, with the support of a genuine spousal application. It would take time, more uncertainty, more London grey from the outside rather than the inside. But it was not the worst. It was not deportation with a ban. It was not the end. It was the hard version of a beginning. A real beginning. Not the one she had constructed. She went back to Nigeria. To Onitsha. To the compound. To her mother's house. She arrived with no fanfare. No victory. No London stories to tell. She came back with the stripped, honest weight of someone who had tried to run ahead of themselves and found out that the things you run from have longer legs than you. Her mother opened the door. David Chukwueke looked at her younger daughter. She said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Come in." 2 words. Come in. But the voice around them. The voice that said, "You are still mine. Whatever you have done, whatever has happened, whatever the world has done with you, and whatever you have done with yourself, you are still mine, and this door is still open." Ulunma walked in. She set down her bag. She sat at the kitchen table. The same table she had sat at her whole life. And for the first time since she had been old enough to decide not to, she cried. Not prettily. Not quietly. The way crying happens when it has been held back for years, and suddenly there is no more capacity for holding. Fully. Completely. Her mother sat beside her. She did not shush. She did not explain. She did not say, "This is what happens when." She just sat there. Beside her. The way she had sat beside both her daughters every time the world was too large. Just present. Just here. Just yours. David came to Nigeria 2 months after Ulunma returned. He came because he had said he would. He came because the marriage was real, whatever its complicated beginning. He came and he sat in the Chukwueke compound, and he met Shabiz properly. Not as a suitor. Not as a new family member performing warmth. As a man who had made a choice and was honoring it even when honoring it was inconvenient. Chabiz served him food. She watched him. He ate and he spoke, and he did not perform. He said, "Mama." He called her Mama the way Nigerian men of good breeding call older women. "I want to tell you something." She looked at him. He said, "I am not here because I have to be. I am here because I chose your daughter. All of her, including the parts that got us into the problem we are in. I am not saying what she did was right. I am saying it is done, and we are going to fix it properly. And I am here because I want you to know that your daughter has a husband. Not just a man in London. A husband." Chabiz looked at him. A long look. The kind that mothers give when they are taking a complete measure. Then she said, "You are a good man." He said, "I try." She said, "No. A man who tries to be good says he is trying. A man who is good just says yes. You just said yes." He was quiet. He said, "I understand." She said, "My daughter is difficult." He said, "I know." She said, "She has always wanted more than life was giving her. From when she was small. I saw it, and I did not know what to do with it." He said, "She is still like that. And you can manage it?" He said, "I don't want to manage it. I want to build with it. There is a difference." Chabiz was quiet. She said, "Yes, there is a difference." She refilled his plate, which, in the Chukwueke compound, was the highest form of acceptance. Adanna and Ulunma spoke again. Not that visit. Not the next. But eventually. It was 6 months after Adanna had come to London. They were both in Onitsha for their mother's birthday. The compound was full. Family. Food. Noise. The specific warm chaos of Nigerian celebrations where everything happens at once and everyone is talking over everything, and somehow it is the best sound in the world. At some point in the evening, Adanna and Ulunma found themselves in the kitchen. Alone. Not by design. Just by the particular way large gatherings create small moments. They stood at the counter. They were both holding food that they had come to collect. They looked at each other. Adanna said, "How are you?" Ulunma said, "Better. The application is moving." Adanna said, "Good." A pause. Ulunma said, "Adanna, I need to ask you something." Adanna said, "Ask." Ulunma said, "Do you regret saying no to him?" A very long pause. Adanna said, "Sometimes. Honest. Just sometimes." Ulunma said, "I'm sorry." Adanna said, "You know the strangest thing? I was glad when I said no. I was genuinely relieved. And then when you told me you were with him, what I felt was not grief about him. It was grief about you. About what you had felt you needed to do." Ulunma said, "Adanna." Adanna said, "I'm not forgiving everything today. But I am not carrying it the same way I was. You are my sister. You did something wrong. You also did it because something was hurting you that I never fully saw. I should have seen it better." Ulunma said, "You are not responsible for." Adanna said, "I know I'm not responsible. But I am saying, I should have seen you better. We should have seen each other better." They stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the sound of their mother's birthday happening on the other side of the wall. Ulunma said, "I'll see you better from now on." Adanna said, "Yes, you will." She picked up her food. She walked back into the noise. Ulunma stood in the kitchen for one moment more. She breathed. She felt the compound around her. The walls of the place she came from. The smell of her mother's cooking. The sound of everything familiar. She thought, "I left this trying to get something better. And the something I got was this. This again. This kitchen. This sister. This mother. This truth. But this time I got it without running from it. This time I got it by coming back." 14 months after she had left the UK, Ulunma returned. This time with a valid visa. Her own name. Her own photograph. Her own application. Fully disclosed. Fully documented. Fully honest. She landed at Heathrow. She presented her passport. The officer looked at it. He looked at her. He stamped it. He said, "Welcome to the United Kingdom, Mrs. Ashford." She picked up the passport. She walked through. David was on the other side, standing in arrivals. With no flowers. No sign. Just him. standing there, in the way of a man who keeps his word. She walked to him. He put his arms around her. She let him. She was not thinking about what came next. She was not planning. She was not building. She was just there, at arrivals, with the truth in her bag and her own name on the passport and the man who had chosen all of her standing in front of her. She said, "I came the right way this time." He said, "You did." She said, "It's slower." He said, "Yes." She said, "But it's real." He said, "Yes, it is." Time passed. Real time. Earned time. Not borrowed. Not constructed. Not run ahead of. Ulunma built a life in London. Not the imagined life she had run toward. The actual life. With its gray mornings, and its complicated paperwork, and its husband who came home at 7:30, and its neighbors upstairs who played music too loud on Fridays. She found work. A small firm that needed someone with her organizational precision and her ability to see 5 steps ahead. She was good at the work. Not because the work was glamorous. Because she was good. Because the sharpness that had always been in her finally had a legitimate place to live. She was promoted within a year. She went back to school part-time. She studied business. She worked. She built. Slowly. The right way. The way that did not require anyone else's name. She and David bought a house. Not in East London. In a part of the city that reminded her, slightly, of something. Not of Onitsha. Of the idea of Onitsha. The warmth of it. The community of it. She planted things in the garden. Things that grew slowly but grew real. Adanna got married. Not to Chitty. She and Chitty had parted ways gently, a year after everything. Adanna had said, "I am not choosing comfort over certainty anymore. I want to be certain." She married a man named Latana Ibe. A doctor. Quiet. Thoughtful. The kind of man who asked what you were thinking and then actually listened to the answer. She was happy. Genuinely happy. Not the performed version. The kind you recognize because it is not performing. Ulunma came to the wedding. She came from London. She wore a dress that was the right color and stood in the right place and held flowers and smiled at her sister and meant all of it. Because by then she meant it. Because by then the thing that had been in her, the calcified, years old, never articulated thing, had been softened. Not dissolved. Softened. By the having gone through it. By the coming back. By the 14 months. By the London arrivals hall. By her mother's kitchen table. By her sister's voice saying, "I should have seen you better." By David at arrivals with no flowers and no sign. Just there. Just choosing. Again. The way that real things choose. Softened. Opened. Changed. Their mother came to London once. A proper visit. 3 weeks. Shabi's Chuck Week in London. In her daughter's house. In the garden with its small plants. In the kitchen that was not as large as the Onitsha compound, but that Ulunma had made into something real. She sat in the garden one afternoon. Ulunma sat beside her. They watched the London sky do what London skies do. Move quickly. Gray to blue to gray again. Her mother said, "This is nice." Ulunma said, "Yes." Her mother said, "Not what you imagined." Ulunma said, "No." Better or worse? Ulunma thought about it. She said, "Real." Her mother said, "Real is better than imagined. Imagined is just a picture. Real is something you can live in." Ulunma said, "I know that now." Her mother said, "You knew it before. You just couldn't feel it before." She reached over. She took her daughter's hand. She held it. The way she had held it in the kitchen. The way she had held it without asking questions, and without demanding explanations, and without requiring anything except that the person on the other end of the hold understand. "You are still mine." They sat there. In the garden. In London. Mother and daughter. The difficult one. The one who wanted too much and went too far. The one who had been seen and also not seen and had turned the not seeing into a decision and paid the full price of that decision and come out the other side of it with her real name. Just her real name. Just herself. Which was, in the end, the thing she had always had. And never quite trusted. There is a thing about the shortcuts. About the ways we construct around the honest path. about the passports with other people's photographs, about the identities we assume when we believe our own is not sufficient. The thing is this: the shortcut always delivers you somewhere, but it never delivers you to yourself. You arrive somewhere, possibly even somewhere good, but you arrive as someone else's name. And living as someone else's name is the most exhausting thing a person can do, because you can never put it down. You can never stop performing it. You can never come home to the face in your own mirror without the reminder that the name that got you here was borrowed, was taken, was never truly yours. And sooner or later, in a letter from the home office, or in a sister's quiet look, or in a husband's question at a kitchen table, sooner or later the world asks, who are you really? And if the answer is built on someone else's foundation, it will not stand. It cannot stand. Not forever. Only what is built on the true thing lasts. Only what is built on the name you were actually given, on the hands you were actually born with, on the wanting that is really yours, on the path that, yes, is slower, yes, is harder, yes, requires what shortcuts are specifically designed to avoid, but delivers you somewhere real, somewhere you can live, somewhere you can grow things in a garden and watch them come up slow and true. And know that what is coming is yours, actually yours, without anyone else's name on it. You just sat with a woman who took her sister's passport. You sat with her in the flat in London when the letter came. You sat with her at the kitchen table when she had to tell the truth to the man she had married. You sat with her at arrivals, 14 months later, coming back the right way. And if you felt her, if some part of her desperation or her ambition or her shame or her finally real arrival reached you, then you already understand why this channel exists. Because we don't tell stories about perfect people. We tell stories about real ones. About women who wanted so much they made terrible decisions. About sisters who hurt each other and had to learn to see each other again. About men who chose to stay when leaving would have been easier. About mothers who opened doors. About the long, slow, unglamorous, irreplaceable work of building a life that belongs to you, that has your actual name on it. These are the stories that don't get told in the quick version. They need time. They need the full sitting. They need someone willing to stay all the way to the arrivals hall. You stayed. So subscribe. Right now, hit that button and make it so this channel knows you're here and knows you want more. Because we have so many more. Stories of sisters and secrets. Stories of choices made in the dark that come apart in the light. Stories of women building things on wrong foundations and having to tear down and rebuild. Stories of the real thing, the slow thing, the thing that lasts. Like this video if Ulunma made you feel something complicated. Like it if you know someone who is living under a borrowed name right now, literally or not. Drop in the comments where you are watching from. And tell us, have you ever taken a shortcut that cost you more than the long road would have? You don't have to say the details. Just yes or no. We want to know how many of us are sitting here with that same truth. The channel is here. The fire is lit. Subscribe and come back. Because the next story is already loaded in the oil. And this one is going to burn bright.